Hey everyone, this is Alex USA Days. So today we're getting into advanced API testing with Postman and a little bit of automation. Those are examples that you can practice along the way with me. You can just pause the video and type things out, and then it's gonna give you like a general understanding on how to build and structure your collection and tests when you will be testing your API. So we covered a lot. This is actually last video in section 9, API testing. And the next section, we're going to get into automation introduction. Now, Postman automation, when you test API, you don't test it just randomly, right? You test against the documentation that will be provided by your company. So when conducting API testing, it is common to refer to the API documentation. It's advisable to coordinate with your team to obtain access to the API documentation. Swagger is a service commonly employed for API visualization. It can conveniently function as a plugin within your integrated development environment. The link to Swagger, I have it in the description, and also you'll have it here in the slide. Now, Postman has a way of organizing your requests into collections. So you should organize your API and test into runnable collections. We will see an example of this happening in the following in this video. So there's also something called Postman environment, and we will be setting Postman environments today. Postman supports the use of environments which are sets of key value pairs. This is useful for managing different configurations such as development, testing, and production environments. Postman also allows you to set variables. So Postman variables can be reused across requests, can be used in different environments. This is helpful for dynamic values such as authentication tokens or dynamic parameters. There's also a doc that I have in the description and reference here in the file where that will allow you to actually have dynamically generated variables for your requests. And we're also going to talk about Postman prerequisite script. So in Postman, a prerequisite script, often referred to as pre-request script, it's a script that is executed before the actual HTTP request is sent. The script allows you to perform actions or set up conditions that should be met before the request is made. It is written in JavaScript and can access various variables and functionalities provided by Postman. And we're going to take a look in the end at the Postman Collection Run. Postman Collection Runner is a feature in Postman that allows you to run a collection of API requests in a specific sequence. It's a powerful tool for automating the execution of multiple requests and testing the functionality of an API across different scenarios. Also, during the video, I'll give you an example on how to generate schema based on the response body and how to validate that schema in your testing. All right, let's get right into it. During the previous video, we did create a bunch of tests for regression testing. We copied some from the payroll API collection. Now, today we're going to get a little bit closer to the work environment. So at work, you're not going to be testing some random API. At work, you will have an actual API that your company uses. This API will have documentation, and you will be testing against that documentation. Now, we're going to work with recres.in webpage. It has an API available that we can use in Postman. And when you're going to be doing API testing at your job, you will take your API file that describes the doc file and probably going to open it with a Swagger or some other tool where it will show you what the API endpoints are, what kind of requests you can do, what kind of response is going to look similar to this. So you'll have to ask your developers where's the API documentation, how you can look into it in order to start testing API. You will be testing against the documentation. So if there is some discrepancies in what API does versus what documentation says, you bring attention to that. You might need to file a bug or talk with a developer or a project manager and so on. Okay, so at this page, just go and follow to recres.in and you'll see a bunch of APIs. So we're going to take a little bit of APIs here. Maybe let's take 4 different methods like get, post, put, and delete. So if I'll click on this, I can open a new link. So here is the link for this request specific. So this request, and it shows what it will do, right? It will get a response of a single user. So let's grab this endpoint. Let's go to Postman. We're going to click and create a blank collection. So let's name this collection as request response. You need to provide a URL for the request. So in our case, it's going to be request.in API users and user number 2. Let's save it and send the request out. Perfect. So we got a first request and the response from that request, and we got status OK. So we can add some tests here. We can verify that indeed status is 200. We also need to get some data. We need to get this response back and verify some of the data that's coming in, right? Okay, so we can say JSON data from the response. Let's get the JSON, this response, and verify users data, something like that, right? So here we're expecting a JSON data dot data, and then over here dot ID to be equal to 2. So this is what we're requesting, right? What else can we add here? So we can add all of that. So email, that particular email, name. So pretty much just gonna go line by line, verifying here all of the values, right? Last name, Weaver, and then avatar. Okay, so what else we're looking at? So we can verify here the support right here. So we verified inside data, let's verify inside support. So instead of data, let's do support and then URL. So this is the URL. And then text. Now you can break your tests as you want. You can have like per one test case, one particular verification of a response, some data that's coming back. You can verify data types per test. So however you want to structure it, it's up to you. You can use this as an example or just find some other examples online. You can talk with developers, or maybe if there is already something in place, you just follow along whatever is used in the company and just structure it the same way. Okay, so let's save it, run a request, everything passed. So user data is correct, status code is correct. Perfect. Also, let's name our request. So a single user. So the request that we're doing now, we're getting a single user, right? So let's rename this and name it single. So let's do get single user. Okay, send it out. Perfect. So we got one test in, okay, or we're verifying one response, one endpoint. What if I'll do user 3 here? If I'll run user 3, now some of the values are starting to fail. You can see that we expected user to be equal to 2. This is our test right here, but we actually got user 3 back. And it didn't even go to any other tests. So it didn't even say, the email is wrong, the first name is wrong. As soon as it failed on one of the values, it pretty much failed the whole test. This whole thing just failed, was the first error coming up. So if I'll update this, you will see now it goes to the next error and so on. Okay, so but we're still going to work with user number 2. Okay, so what else we can do? Remember we had a schema validation before, so there was an example of a schema. What kind of data types and how it should be structured, what should be coming back. You will be able to look in documentation and see what data type is expected. You will be able to see if the fields are required or not, and so on. But what we also can do with our single user, because the structure for each user, the layout and the response body going to be the same, it doesn't matter which user we take, we also can add a schema validation, right? So here in schema response validation, we know that we need some place where we need to store schema. So let's just grab this as a placeholder, put it at the very top. Okay, so this is going to be our schema. So how do we get a schema for this response, right? You can grab the whole response, then go to free online JSON to JSON schema converter, or you can grab your schema from your API docs, but I can just paste this here. Not robot, generate schema, and the whole schema generated. Now you'll see a bunch of values that marks as required. So whatever your API doc says should be required. You should verify that it is required. So let's grab now this schema. Let's place it back here. Okay. So one thing that we don't need is this first line that says schema. So starts with type object and everything goes in. Now the next step, what we need to do is we want to get a test that verifies schema, right? So let's add this test right here. So response matches JSON schema. The response to have JSON schema, expected schema. So expected schema is stored in this variable, and then JSON schema is going to be taken, generated by Postman based on your response. Let's run it, and the schema passes. Now, if I'll comment out this user verification, okay, so I commented everything by pressing Control/, highlighted the whole line, Control/, everything's commented out, so the code is not going to be used. So everything commented out. Now, if I'll change user to 3 now, so I'll get a different user back, ran it, and it still passes. Why does it still pass, right? Because the schema that we're testing against is going to be the same for each response. Doesn't matter which user we're getting back, it's still going to match the schema that we're testing against, right? So some of the tests you can structure against specific data, other tests you can structure against the schema, making sure that all responses validate to that schema. Okay, let's update this back to user number 2, send it out, perfect. Now let's grab something else. Let's grab a different request. So let's get post. So this will create a user, right? So we can just grab the link that we already have here. So we can right click, duplicate. This will be different. We will be doing post create user. So change this to post, and the endpoint API users, just API users. So API users, just like that. Now, one thing that you need to provide, and we can delete all of the tests that we have here. One of the things that you need to provide in this request is a body. You can't create a user if you don't have a body, right? So if I'll send this out, it just gave an ID without any first name, last name. Based on documentation, we need to provide name and a job. So let's add a body. So we can click row, and then what kind of body we're providing, JSON, and we can paste this here. All right, perfect. So a user was created. Now, one thing that you can do in Postman, you can have dynamic variables. So every time you run a request, the dynamic variable will be run. Let's do dynamic variables, Postman for name. Okay, there's a good bunch. I'll provide this link in the description. So there's a good bunch of dynamic variables that you can have. And this is how it can be used. So let's grab random first name. Okay, so name, and we're going to have a random first name, and you have to include it in double parentheses like this. All right, so now if I'll run it, every time you can see it generates a random response. So different names on each request. Perfect. So over here in the tests, we still can add, so 201. So the status code is different now. It's 201 for a created user. So let's add 201. And since the name is different every time, so we can't really, verify unless we pass a specific name. Right now, it's going to be randomly generated. So for that, we can just verify a specific data type, right? So how we had it here. So here we had a data type validation. So let's just grab this. So returns name as a string. We would need to grab response body. So JSON data and just a string, right? So what do we get? JSON data, and then dot name to be a string. Let's run it. Okay, so one thing that we need to update, we updated in test name that status code is 201, but we didn't update it in the test case. So let's update it, run it again. Perfect. So what else we can verify? So we verified the name is there and it's a string. The next thing that we're getting back is job, and job is always the same, so it's always leader. Kind of similar thing that we already did here. We can just grab this, copy and paste it. And JSON data dot job is equal to leader. So in quotes leader. ID will be different all the time, and time step will be different. Okay, perfect. So this is working as intended. And the last one, let's add a deletion. So the last one will be, let's add a delete. So 204 will get any response. And then same endpoint for the same user, number 2, but we're just deleting it. So duplicate. Let's rename this. Delete user update request from post to delete. And then you have to provide user. There's no body for the delete. right? Save it. And the only thing that we need to confirm, like let's say 204, right? So it's actually deleted. So let's run it. Okay, 204, we get no content response. It is there. So we're good. Okay, so we created like a bunch of tests here, a bunch of requests with different tests. We can add more. We can think about other scenarios. So you can see how you start building a collection based on your API documentation, right? One thing that you also might want to consider is adding an environment. Configure different environments, and you can have variables that correspond with those environments, and it is going to be a lot easier for you to switch between like development, production, and test. You can have one collection, multiple environments. So we can add a new environment. So let's add, for example, there's a global that can be used by everyone. For global environments, for example, here HTTPS is going to be our protocol, right? So we can set it as a variable, set new variable, let's say protocol. There's HTTP or HTTPS, and then the scope. So if we're gonna do it in the global scope, anywhere this variable is used, it will be understood. It doesn't matter what environment you're in, if it's in the global level, your request will talk with that environment, with this variable. So it knows HTTPS is behind this variable. So if I'll hover over it, you see HTTPS. It's still gonna work, right? Now let's create a variable for ID. So ID, right? Now for the ID, let's actually set it like this, set as a variable. Set new variable, so ID, and then let's have different scope. For, okay, we did not create an environment yet, so let's create an environment first. So add environment, and let's call it test. Okay, and also let's add another environment and call it dev. Right, so we got two environments now set. So for this single user, we can also set the ID as a variable. Set as new variable, name ID, and we can have a specific scope. So it doesn't allow us to select on the environment level because no active environment selected. So let's change the environment to test. Okay, so highlighted, set as a variable, set new variable, ID, select scope, test. Okay, so now in test, we see it's always going to be value number 2 set here. So if I run it, we get our 2. But if let's say I'm in dev, I can in dev also add a variable ID, and I can say the current value is 3. Okay, save it. So what will happen now when I switch between environments? In test, it's 2. If I go to dev, it's actually 3. So based on the environments, you can configure your test to run in different environments with different variables to have different outcomes, right? Now, if I run it in dev, it will fail, right? Starting failing on the ID that comes back. So instead of 2, we get 3 back, and it's failing the test. So if we switch from dev to test environment, run it again, we're looking good. Okay, so one more thing that is available to us, it is a prerequisite script. So this is more of kind of, a development thing here, so closer to automation, but you can actually execute scripts before you get into tests. And those scripts can be different things like getting a specific token back or setting some variables, generating numbers, and so on. So in the prerequisite script, let's set a different global variable. Let's set a name, right? Let's actually go to the post, go to in prerequisite scripts. So here we send job out as a leader. So actually, in prerequisite scripts, let's create a collection variable that will be used here in the body. Instead of leader, we'll place something else into the script. So set a collection variable. So PM collection variable key, and variable value. So let's call it job title, and let's set it to QA engineer, right? Okay, so this variable was set. If I run it, and I'll go into the collection variables right here now, job title, QA engineer. So it was set using prerequisite script. So before it runs this request, it will run this script. Now in the body, we can actually now use this variable. Let's have a variable here. Job title. Need to use double parentheses. Okay, let's run it. And here it's using QA engineer. Just double parentheses and the variable inside. Okay, here we go, QA engineer. So this comes from a prerequisite script. The prerequisite script runs before the request. It creates a variable. All right, so with that being done, we looked at the environment variables. We looked at generating random values. We looked at prerequisite script and saving variables. We looked at different types of tests that we can do, and now we have this collection. So what would be a last step once you went through your documentation, you created your API tests based on your doc? Now you can actually run collection and do a collection run report. So if you see here, there is run a collection button. So like if you click on this hamburger menu, also if you want this collection to be at top, you can mark it as favorite. So it's going to be first. Run collection. It asks you for order and what requests are we running. We can schedule runs in a specific environment. We can run manually. So let's run manually first. So one iteration, we're going to run it once, and then here we go. 3 tests passed, 3 tests passed, 1 test failed because we did not update our post. So go back to post tests. It was looking for a leader, but now we actually inserted the QA engineer. So let's update it to QA engineer, send it out. Okay, perfect. Let's run our collection again. Okay, here's our report. So 7 tests pass. Everything looks good. Iteration environment was test. How long it take to run? 1 second. 138 milliseconds. All tests. Response time. Average response time here. Okay. You can view summary of the run. So like, I guess visually it's easier to read the summary here. And also if needed, when you run collection, you can also do scheduled run, right? Daily, let's say daily, or every day, right? Every day at whatever time you want to run it, at 7 a.m. So before work starts in a test environment, you run it one time, and then you'll get an email notification if to your account email, and you can schedule the run. So now when it's going to run, whatever email was associated to your account here when you were signing up for Postman, you'll get the report once it runs to your email with the results. Okay, so there is automation you can actually build in, easy kind of automation that you have here with Postman when you test API. Okay, so that's it. Hopefully this video was helpful. This was Alex USA Days. Thanks for watching and subscribe for more, and bye bye.